It's great to be in the SEC. Welcome back to another episode of the SEC Recap Podcast. This time it is the Precap, the Week 3 preview episode. We're going to be taking a look at these upcoming SEC Week 3 matchups. A few other non-conference games that are very, very interesting too. We'll kind of touch on those near the very end. While I got you here, thanks for joining on YouTube. Go ahead and hit that thumbs up, smash that like, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment. It really helps us out with the analytics here. But however you prefer to chug your podcast, whether you're on YouTube, Amazon, Apple, Spotify, iHeart, TuneIn, all those great platforms, thank you for being here. Do just want to point out, though, real quick, we do have video podcasts available on Spotify, YouTube Music as well. If you're not watching on YouTube, got some graphics up on screen that I think you may appreciate, that you may enjoy here. Let's jump right into it. We're going to start with the LSU South Carolina game. This is if you're Eastern time, this will be a noon kickoff. If you're Central time like me, this will be an 11 a.m. kick. Number 16, LSU. Sorry, I got that wrong in my graphic here. I had made this back before they updated the AP rankings. So amateur move on my part. I didn't go back and fix it, but I'm just going to roll with it. Okay. And if you're listening and I hadn't said anything, you probably never would have known. Also on my graphics this week, I included some of those stats I touched on in last week's preview episode. PPA success rate for offensive defense, open field yards, which I really tried to dive into, but realized without a kind of visual to help you grasp the core concept, it's just spitting a lot of stats out for those of you listening. And so I wanted to do a better job this week of explaining some of these and why I choose to use these. I'm not going to dive in and look at distinct personnel. Like I'm not going to do quarterback on quarterback, cornerback on wide receiver, interior offensive lineman. There are a ton of people who cover that stuff. They do a great job of it. I want to look at some team metrics that after crunching a bunch of numbers through last season and into the preseason, I feel like really help illuminate how a game might unfold. Now, these are all retroactive analytics, right? These are retroactive statistics. They're not predictive in any way, but it gives you a great idea of some of the types of team matchups that you will see here. So with that being said, let's just dive in and look at it. So this is 16 LSU going on the road. This will be ESPN's College Game Day, 11 a.m. kick Central Time, noon Eastern. Now, a lot of books. I'm looking at the ESPN bet odds. Whether you use those or not, it doesn't matter. I don't actually bet on games. I live in a state where I can't do that. They have this at LSU as a 7-point favorite. My handicap has this game quite a bit closer, as you can see here on screen. I have LSU as just a 1-point favorite on the road. That is factoring in a few other things. It is predicted to be a rainy game, in which case the teams aren't expected to put the ball through the air as much. You expect that they will try to keep it on the ground, play a little ball control, clock control, give you an idea of how they might expect it to play out. So with that in mind, I'm giving South Carolina 2.5 or so points for playing at home, coming off a hot win versus, albeit a bad Kentucky team, a good win on the road for that program, catching a ranked LSU team in the rain where really, I feel like even though both of these teams aren't great rushing teams, I think you might see a little bit of favorability swing South Carolina's way here. So let's look at some of the offensive stats first, and then I'll talk about some of the defensive metrics that I like to use here. So first is EPA. I have it listed here as PPA. Credit to College Football Data. This is where I query my data from. They have a ton of fantastic analytics. So I'll credit them in the show notes as well. But that is where I pull a lot of this from. Their calculation is called PPA. EPA, it's a really similar metric. It's expected points per play, which is really a field position metric. If you're on the opponent's side of the field in a better position to score, your EPA or expected points is higher. If you're on your own side of the field, a 10-yard play, your expected points per play is going to be lower. in that regard. That's not a great explanation, but shining a little bit of light on it. So you get an understanding of how we're going to compare these two, right? So South Carolina's EPA is 0.082 versus LSU is 0.3652. And what that indicates is that South Carolina is going to struggle a bit more on offense. When EPA is lower, that's a bad thing. You want EPA to trend higher. This is EPA per play. So South Carolina generally struggling to translate points or plays into points consistently versus LSU's offense. Although they're not a great rushing team, they are more explosive in the passing game. And generally, EPA is going to be higher on passing plays than it is rushing plays because your opportunity for explosiveness is generally higher. So LSU at a 0.3652 EPA indicates a significantly more efficient offense capable of producing points at a much higher rate. Let's talk about success rate then. Back to South Carolina, 34.8% success rate on offense versus LSU's 51.3% chance. Now, how they calculate success rate is, say you're on 1st and 10, you want to get at least 5 yards or better on 1st and 10. That would be considered a successful play. On 2nd and 5 or 2nd and 4, you want to generate at least 3 yards on that play. And then when you're on 3rd and 4th down, you want to be converting 3rd and 4th down, obviously. Those are considered successful plays. So South Carolina is struggling again a bit more. This goes back to that PPA. That's why I use these statistics together, is they go really well hand in hand. A low EPA with a lower success rate is going to indicate a little bit more sluggish, inconsistent offense. So this is reflecting that lack of consistency for the Gamecocks. Low percentage of plays are gaining the expected yardage based on that down and distance. And so we're seeing an increased amount of maybe stalled drives, failed drives, increasing the amount of times that you're having to go to special teams and punt the ball. 51% or better is generally positive, right? So the LSU offense there are much more successful in maintaining drives, moving the chains, setting up scoring opportunities regularly. Now, the explosiveness factor on offense. You want to be trending around 1.5 or better. Below 1.5 is like 1 to 1.5. Well, 1.15 to 1.5 is kind of moderate to or average, and anything around 1 is going to be generally not very explosive or not very productive. So for South Carolina, 1.22 and LSU 1.77. So LSU demonstrating quite a bit more explosivity, particularly through their passing game. Again, these are not great rushing teams. To give you an idea, South Carolina averaging 126.5 yards per game. I don't always love per game, but it's an easy way of breaking it down. Compared to LSU, 90.5 yards per game. Okay, so these are South Carolina number 14, LSU dead last in the SEC through 2 weeks in terms of rushing yards per game, rushing efficiency. So at that 1.22 EPA per explosive play, it indicates that when South Carolina's offense does make a big play, typically through the passing game, it tends to have a higher impact on the game. However, due to the lack of overall offensive efficiency, those moments are going to be fewer and far between. LSU, on the other hand, let's see, go back to my number here, 1.77. That means LSU is going to capitalize better on those explosive plays. So although they have an overall higher offensive efficiency, they're going to rely less on big plays. They still tend to capitalize on their big plays more effectively, more efficiently than South Carolina does. All right. I won't explain all of these on each of these games, but I just want to set it up through this first game to give you a better idea and understanding of how we look at these stats. Moving on into some of the defensive stats I like. Defensive open field yards. You want that number to be lower. So that is number of yards past the 10-yard line, or not past the 10-yard line, but past 10 yards in the open field from the line of scrimmage that a defense allows. So it's indicating somewhat of a lack of pressure by the defensive line. It also captures a little bit of your placement of linebackers, pass coverage, and how well your safeties and defensive backs play in the open field. I also have defensive success rate. Opposite of offensive success rate, you want offensive success rate to be a higher number. You want defensive success rate to be a lower number. Okay. And then havoc rate. Havoc is a great metric that calculates how disruptive, percentage of plays in which a defense was disruptive. And you'll see this sometimes separated into defensive line havoc rate, defensive back havoc rate. I just give you a total. So defensive line plus the DBs, safeties, corners, all those positions in combination. So first here, defensive open field yards. South Carolina much better than LSU at limiting that. 34 open field yards compared to LSU's 87. So South Carolina better at limiting the amount of plays that opposing offenses are able to make in the open field. That favors South Carolina heavily. In a matchup where LSU could throw the ball a little better because it's going to be raining, South Carolina going to be able to keep everything in front of them better, I think, than the LSU defense. Now let's talk about defensive success rate. South Carolina, much better defensive success rate, 35.1% versus LSU's 50.5%. So not only does South Carolina do a better job of limiting open field plays in the open field, they do a much better job at keeping offenses behind the sticks. We saw that with great success at the Kentucky game in Lexington. And then a great stat to pair both of those things with is the havoc rate. How disruptive is the defensive line and how disruptive are the defensive backs that may be causing turnovers? So forcing fumbles, getting interceptions, that sort of thing. You want the havoc rate to be higher. So a higher percentage of plays that you cause havoc on is a great way of thinking of it. South Carolina, 27.1% versus LSU, 19.5%, essentially. So South Carolina, much better at being disruptive, not only along the line of scrimmage, but downfield as well with their linebackers and defensive backs. All of those things favor South Carolina. So whereas a lot of books are going to have South Carolina as a big underdog in this game, these are some of the reasons why I actually think this game is a little closer than maybe a lot of people are anticipating. This is a great opportunity for South Carolina to get a ranked win at home, basically after being left for dead in week one after that Old Dominion game. So offensively, everything kind of favors LSU with the exception of the run game, which they're not great in. Defensively, things here really favor the Gamecocks. So although LSU is ranked, it's an AP ranking. It doesn't mean squat, in my opinion. Look at the team metrics. I think things are really kind of aligning for South Carolina to have a good game here. That being said, I still have LSU as a 1-point favorite on the road. 1 point, though, we're basically flipping a coin. That is not a game that I would bet money on. Would it surprise me if LSU wins? No, absolutely not. They are a ranked team and they are favored. But nobody should be surprised if the Gamecocks pull off a ranked upset here, especially kind of with the stats that we're looking at. I like them to be disruptive. I like them to limit what LSU is able to do in the open field. And I think the fact that it could be a rainy, wet game is going to favor that style of play. So I still have LSU -1, but I'm a little bit of a lean toward the Gamecocks. Interested to see what that line looks like as we get closer to the game on Saturday. Again, noon on Saturday, college game day. That's the ESPN ABC game of the morning. Let's move on. Look at the second game I have on the slate here. This is SEC on SEC, by the way. We'll touch on some of these other SEC marquee games at the end of all this. Texas A&M on the road in the swamp. This will be 2:30 p.m. ABC game. So as soon as that LSU South Carolina game is over, we'll get A&M Florida coverage. And my line is right in line with a lot of the bets or a lot of the odds or the books. Sorry, can't talk. I have A&M as -4 on the road. I thought Florida looked a lot better with DJ Lagway at the helm, but you just have no freaking clue what Billy Napier is going to do offensively. And I think that's going to favor A&M, even though it is in the swamp. We'll see if home field advantage makes a difference. I'm giving them a little bit of that with this number. I still like Texas A&M minus the 4. I would be careful about picking A&M to go much more than that. I see a lot of people that are picking A&M to win by a couple of scores here. I'm not quite there yet. Pause for a sip of beer. All right. Let's look at some of the team metrics. EPA, Florida 0.257, A&M 0.218. Now, this is cumulative. This is through week 2, right? This is an aggregate snapshot of the season so far. So offensively favoring Florida, I would favor Florida quite a bit more if we do see DJ Lagway. If it's Graham Mertz, I would expect them to be under that average, okay? Offensive success rate, Florida 45.1% versus A&M 51.9%. If Connor Wegman can have the kind of game that he had last week, I like A&M to put up points on this Florida defense. I don't think this Florida defense is very good. To give you an idea of where they rank in the SEC, just in terms of like total yards per game, they're almost last. 15 out of 16. LSU is last in total yards. Passing defense, Florida is dead last. And in rushing defense, they are, 60, 50, 40, 30, 12. They're 11th. Okay. So not a good defense at limiting yardage overall. If A&M can convert some of these plays into scoring opportunities, I really, really, really like their chances. Let me dive deep into this a little bit more. So Texas A&M, moderate efficiency, turning plays into points. They're a capable offense, definitely not an elite scoring unit. Florida shows a little bit more efficiency and explosiveness, like we said, especially if DJ Lagway's steering that ship. Marginally better than Texas A&M. If it's Graham Mertz, I like Texas A&M more with that metric. The success rate, Texas A&M has a pretty solid offense. They consistently kind of get that expected yardage per play. They can sustain drives. Versus Florida, it's going to be much more prone to that offense stalling out and struggling to maintain momentum. Now, the explosiveness factor here. The explosiveness factor favors Florida. A lot of this, guys, though, is getting skewed because of that DJ Lagway game last week where he threw for 400-plus yards on Samford. So be careful with this stat. This is non-opponent adjusted, okay? But that explosiveness factor for Florida, 1.5, 1.49 versus Texas A&M's 0.91. Just understand that Samford game really skews this. But if it is DJ Lagway and he can create some of those explosive plays, I know fans want to see that. Expect this to be a game. Expect this to be a game, okay? Let's talk defensive now. Open field yards. Texas A&M allowing 83 on the season versus Florida allowing 109. So Texas A&M's defense struggling to kind of contain plays once they break past the line of scrimmage. They do have some vulnerabilities in tackling, running players down in the open field. Florida also very vulnerable to long gains once opponents are past that line of scrimmage. So Florida also showing a lot of issues stopping big plays downfield. That metric still favors Florida a little bit versus that A&M defense, just for the big play factor that DJ Lagway brings into that, right? So defensive success rate, you want this number to be lower. Both of these teams are right around 50%. Texas A&M 50.5, Florida 47.7. So really comparable. Both teams showing considerable difficulty in preventing opposing offenses from achieving success on plays, typically allowing opposing offenses to sustain drives, put themselves in scoring position. But the havoc rate, Florida showing a little bit better success rate creating disruptive plays. Okay. So Florida may be able to force A&M into a few more mistakes. Oftentimes it's 1 or 2 turnovers, guys, that can be the determining factor in these games. So a team is sustaining a drive, you've strung together a 70-yard drive, you force a turnover in the red zone, that changes the momentum. Okay, so that's where that havoc factor being higher for Florida favors them a little bit. Overall, I think A&M is going to have to lean on that methodical offensive success, kind of wear down Florida's defense while avoiding those turnover opportunities that Florida's defense is going to try to create. If you're Florida, you want to leverage as much explosiveness on offense as you can muster, and I think that's going to have to come from DJ Lagway seeing game time. If it's all Graham Mertz, I think you're going to see a shit show in the swamp. They need to try to disrupt A&M's drives. They need to convert big plays into points on offense and kind of maybe try to capitalize on some Texas A&M defensive lapses in the open field. So Florida's really kind of feast or famine offensively, whereas Texas A&M, more of a mark of consistency. We'll see how that plays out. I do like A&M minus the 4 here. I think A&M winning by a couple of field goals could be the difference. I'm not sure if I'd go a full touchdown extra point here, but a couple of field goals I could absolutely see playing out in this game. All right, my last SEC on SEC matchup of this episode is number 1 Georgia headed to Lexington. Now, this was going to be ESPN's College Game Day until Kentucky got the doors beat off of them in Lexington by the Gamecocks. So you'll see a little bit bigger number than this in a lot of places, maybe 24 or so. That's probably accurate. I have it handicapped at 21.5. Again, if it is more of a rainy event, I like both teams to keep the ball on the ground. But generally, everything here, y'all, favors Georgia, and it's not going to be particularly close. Offensively, you're going to see a huge match here in the EPA. Kentucky 0.29 per play versus Georgia 0.429. So Georgia, very, very efficient on offense. Excellent converting plays into points. This is one of the more potent offensive units in the league. They can run the ball when they want to. They can throw the ball when they want to. And not a lot of people have been particularly efficient at stopping them. Kentucky struggling on offense. Brock Vandagriff, my worst rated quarterback in the SEC last week. Efficiency of scoring is low. Lack of consistent success converting drives into points. Okay. Unreliable offense, struggling to sustain drives. Reduced amount of scoring opportunities. Whereas Georgia has a success rate better than 51%, which is what you want to see. Methodical, consistently converting plays into scoring opportunities, converting on your scoring opportunities when you're in the red zone. All things Georgia is very, very good at, things that Kentucky we just have not seen. Pause for a sip of beer. I'm just putting that in there, by the way, for those people listening and they wonder why there's a 5, 6, 7 second pause. They think maybe their podcast stopped. My throat gets dry. I have to stop and take a drink. So I'm trying to narrate it a little bit as I go. Let's talk explosiveness. Kentucky, there's just not a lot there. They're trending around that 1.05 mark, whereas Georgia, they're kind of closing in on that 1.5. That means when Georgia does make big plays, they significantly impact the game. They're typically leading to a scoring opportunity, whereas any explosiveness that Kentucky generates, it's generally not setting them up for a scoring opportunity, or they're not capitalizing on the scoring opportunity. On the defensive side, open field yards. This is a huge disparity here. Kentucky allowing 20, which you'd think is very, very good at keeping the ball in front of them. Georgia just 1 open field yard on the season. That favors Georgia naturally. Defensive success rate, Kentucky 34.2 versus Georgia 26.8. So again, you want defensive success rate to be lower. that mid to low 20s number is an excellent number. That means Georgia is preventing opposing offenses from having success on every down and distance. So they're allowing short yardage gains on 1st and 10. They're not allowing opponents to convert 3rd downs and 4th downs. Havoc rate here. Now, this is skewed a little bit. Kentucky, a good Havoc team. They did have 13 tackles for loss against South Carolina, but it wasn't really able to swing the momentum. So while Kentucky's Havoc rate is 32.1%, you'd think that would have a big impact on the game. I don't think it's going to here. Georgia's Havoc rate much lower, 21.6%. So not as disruptive, but generally they're just limiting yardage to opposing offenses. So that Havoc rate, I know it looks better for Kentucky, but that's not going to be a momentum shift in this matchup whatsoever, I don't think, especially if it's a rainy game. I like Georgia to keep the ball on the ground a lot. And when they do get some explosive plays, I like them to convert those plays into points. Really kind of like my key insights for this, besides the clear advantage on offense with Georgia, the higher scoring efficiency, success rate, explosiveness, Georgia is just probably going to maintain and sustain longer drives, putting consistent pressure on Kentucky's defense and keeping them on the field longer. If Kentucky can create a turnover, I think that's their best opportunity, but they need to do it and kind of put themselves in favorable field position. So if you're Georgia, you want to leverage that efficiency on offense against a defense that's good, but is probably not going to be able to keep up with you over the course of the game. They're going to aim to control the game with that high success rate and then convert those explosive plays into scoring opportunities. If you're Kentucky, your strategy is going to be try to cause some turnovers, try to be disruptive. If you can disrupt Georgia's offense and maybe force some mistakes, that could compensate somewhat for a struggling offense, although that's a big hurdle to jump. Offensively, Kentucky, you've got to improve success rate on downs. You've got to get 4 or 5 yards on 1st and 10. You really need to be, if you're looking at like 2nd and 4, 2nd and 5, you need to try to be getting 2 and 3 yards a carry. Give yourself 3rd and short opportunities. If you're in 3rd and long against this Georgia defense, it's just going to be a long night for your team as a whole. So I like Georgia, honestly. I think my 21.5 here is low. I do like Georgia by more than this. South Carolina handled them, 31-6. I think Georgia can do at least that. Kentucky might not score in this game, honestly. This could be a shutout for Georgia. Not going to bank on that. If you're fishing out parlays here on the SEC Recap podcast, which I would not be doing, by the way, do not take anything I say as betting advice, but my number is low. I do like Georgia better than the 21.5 here. I might even like a better than the 24 I'm seeing in a lot of other places. So that's the night game there. 6:30 p.m. on ABC, SEC on SEC at Kroger Field in Lexington. Let's really quickly talk some of the other marquee matchups. We'll get rid of this. We don't need this here. And just me and you guys. I can just talk right at the screen. A big one kind of earlier. I know everybody's talking about Alabama, Wisconsin. Alabama's a 16-point favorite in that game. I know it's a road game. I just don't think Wisconsin's going to be much of a factor. We'll see. I know South Florida gave the Tide trouble last week. They outlasted them. I'm thinking Alabama's going to get some stuff right here and maybe fix some things even on the road. We'll see how Milroe plays. Last week I had him. He wasn't great. I had him as my number 12 quarterback coming out of week 2. I mean, he completed 17 of 27 passes, 63% completion rating for 199 yards, 2 touchdowns. So if he's just that good, I think Alabama's going to be just fine in this game. Maybe Wisconsin is able to keep it close for a half, but I just think Alabama's going to run away with it there. So I don't know if I'd pick Alabama to cover 16, but I like them to win outright. Now, a ranked matchup that I know is probably not getting the attention it deserves, and maybe I should have covered it on this podcast, but number 24 Boston College at number 6 Mizzou. Now, had what happened last week not happened, that is an unranked Boston College beating Florida State, I don't think we'd be talking much about this game at all. I think you'd look and see Boko coming to Como, and you'd write it off in your head automatically as a win for Mizzou. The fact that Boston College beat Florida State and cracked the top 25 makes this interesting, but Mizzou still being a minus 17 point favorite. I like Mizzou's defense a lot. I just don't think Boston College is going to be able to do to Mizzou's defense what they did to Florida State's. To give you an idea defensively, Mizzou very good at limiting opposing offenses in terms of yards. They're averaging a yards per game to opposing offenses of 127. That's best in the SEC. That puts them ahead of Georgia and ahead of Tennessee. Passing wise, they've got the top passing offense yards per game wise, and then rushing, they're kind of middle of the road. So you can run a little bit better on this Mizzou defense than you can throw on them, but they've shut everybody out. Now I know they really haven't played anybody. Maybe Boston College will be a little bit more of a challenge. We'll see. But so far through 2 games, they've pitched shutouts. I just don't know that. I know a ranked matchup makes this look more engaging than I think it's actually going to be. I think Mizzou handles Boston College handily. Therefore, I'm not really covering it on the podcast. I think we might just be making a little bit more out of something that's not really going to be anything, if that makes sense. A 2:30 p.m. game on ESPN. Now, this one is getting a little bit of buzz. Tulane at number 15, Oklahoma. Oklahoma is showing a little bit of a dud. I know they got the win, but a 2-point win over Houston in week 2. Oklahoma showing some cracks there. Exploitable if you're Tulane. Now, books have this, have Oklahoma minus 13.5. I might have this a little closer. I might have Oklahoma maybe minus 11. It is at Oklahoma. This game is at Memorial Stadium in Norman. Tulane, though, that's one you got to watch out for, man. That is a team that will jump up and bite you. They beat USC a couple years ago in a bowl game. They have that potential. That's all I'm saying. They have that potential. So if you're Oklahoma and you slept a little bit last week on Houston, do not be sleeping on Tulane. I think Oklahoma will do what they need to do to win this game, but it would not surprise me one bit if Tulane pulls an upset here. That's all I'm saying. Would not surprise me one bit. So if you wanted to take Tulane to cover 13.5, might not be a bad play. Might not be a bad play at all. Number 5, Ole Miss at Wake Forest, 5:30 p.m. game, road game. I know it's Power 5. Mizzou. Ole Miss is a huge favorite in this game. This game should not be close. Ole Miss should handle Wake Forest, but sometimes those games can be weird. By the way, you can catch this one on the CW network. Cool. But I think Ole Miss, Power 5 matchup, could something weird happen? Sure. I don't expect it. Nothing else really interesting outside of New Mexico at Auburn. Now, this is not the same New Mexico team that beat them last year. That was New Mexico State. But we have New Mexico, different team, same state, and a night game in Jordan-Hare. Auburn is minus 28. Peyton Thorne, not looking good. Where was he in my QB ratings? I'm not sure I touched on him in the recap episode. He was number 15 overall in my rankings last week. 14 of 27, 51.9%, 165 yards, 1 touchdown, 4 interceptions. What you're looking for here is for Peyton Thorne to take better care of the ball. Maybe you keep the ball on the ground a little bit more. However, let's check out some rushing efficiency. So Auburn kind of back third in terms of rushing yards per game. They are, I think, back third as well. No, a little bit better in the passing game just in terms of yardage, but you just want to eliminate the possibility that Peyton Thorne turns the ball over there. 4 interceptions. You turn the ball over 4 times. I think any FBS team who's worth their salt can capitalize on that. So Auburn should win. 28 points is a lot. We'll see if they fix a few things going into week 3 here. And then nothing else really jumps off to me. Tennessee, number 7, playing like the worst team in the FBS. Minus 49. If you want to take a flyer there, I think Tennessee could easily hang 70 on this Kent State team. UTSA at number 2, Texas. Shouldn't be a contest. Nothing else is really screaming at me as being close here. So there you have it. Give me LSU, maybe South Carolina in a close one there in Columbia. Might lean the Gamecocks by the time this game rolls around on Saturday. I do like Texas A&M in the swamp at Florida in a game that both of these teams need, by the way. Billy Napier desperately needs this to kind of keep the wheels turning on that struggle bus. Wheels very close to falling off, but I like Texas A&M to get that win and for the Florida Gators to keep flopping around down there in Gainesville. And then, of course, I like number 1, Georgia to handle business at Kentucky. Guys, I managed to keep this one under 45 minutes. It's amazing. It's a miracle. Let me know what you think in the comments. Drop a comment on this video with your score prediction. Hit me on Twitter at SEC Recap. Let me pop that up here on the screen. Drop me your score predictions. Hit me with a follow. If you're here with us on YouTube, like, subscribe to the channel. Follow me on all the socials. Get all my stuff at secrecap.com. Don't forget to also check out my store, y'all. I didn't even plug my store today, but I know I got the ticker scrolling here at the bottom. Let me see if I can bring this in before I just jump off here real quick. bonfire.com/store/SEC recap. I've got something here for everybody. My newest launch, the Nico I Am a Believer t-shirt. My Big Doink Energy tees. Guys, show your love for Big Doinks with the Big Doink Energy tee. You got short sleeve, long sleeve, hoodie. I think all the designs and colors look great. Plus, I got something for all my other legacy SEC teams. If you're Texas or Oklahoma, I do have a new lineup coming at you here within the next couple of weeks that will feature Texas and Oklahoma. A brand new lineup, new designs, all that stuff. I'm going to cut it off there, y'all. Enjoy the weekend. We'll see how these games play out. As always, I will be here to recap it for you on the Sunday, Monday pod. We'll update the power rankings model and see how these numbers shake out. Have a great week. I will catch you on the next one.